or 5 p.m., whichever works.
Yep, perfect. Sounds great. I will let her know to jump on right at 8 p.m.
I think she's already on.
Looks like she's already here.
Wow. I was just texting you, boss.
Hi, Congresswoman Strickland. I think you're on mute, actually.
Here I am.
Perfect. Thanks for jumping on. You're a couple minutes early, which is great. But they were saying that they will get started right at 8 p.m. Are you guys going to get started early?
It depends on like whether people show up early as well. I've been pushing for my members to show up as well.
Okay. I'll go on mute and let me know when you're ready.
Perfect. We'll do.
Is about 8 o'clock, and we have people in the waiting room.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. Okay, we'll give it maybe a minute or two for anyone else to come in, but we'll start like promptly at like 8:01, 8:02, if that's okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much all for being here. I just want to say thank you, Congresswoman Strickland, for agreeing to come on. And thank you, Sarah, for coordinating this with us. I think you may or maybe not remember me from Georgia during the election season. It was great to talk to you then, and it'll be great to talk to you today. Just as a reintroduction, my name is Ankita. I'm from Georgia, and I'm the current NHPI caucus chair. I'm so excited to have Congresswoman Strickland on for our collaboration with Washington High School Democrats and the Black Caucus for their Black History Month celebration, Black Heritage Month celebration. And I'd love to pass it on to Jonica to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Jonica Kwan. I'm the chair of the Washington High School Democrats of America, or WASDA as we like to call it, where we're so lucky to have Congresswoman Strickland representing us in Congress.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jordan Gully. I'm from East St. Louis, Illinois, actually, Congresswoman Bazinski's district, and I have the great honor of serving as the Black Caucus Chair. First of all, Madam Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. You have a busy schedule and a very much challenge that you're rising to the occasion dealing with the current situation in Washington. But I have the honor of kicking off the event with an introduction about you. One thing about it, Congresswoman Strickland's record speaks for itself. She proudly represents Washington's 10th congressional district, covering parts of Pierce and Thurston counties. A trailblazer in American politics, she has made history as the first African American to represent Washington state at the federal level and one of the first Korean women elected to Congress. Born in Seoul, Korea, Congresswoman Strickland brings a unique perspective to leadership with a deep commitment to economic growth, education, and infrastructure. She earned her BA from the University of Washington and an MBA from Clark Atlanta University, which is a highly respected HBCU located in Atlanta, Georgia. Her career in public service includes 2 terms as the mayor of Tacoma, where that was most definitely my most impressive thing about you. The Congresswoman raised the minimum wage. She passed paid sick leave. And this is my favorite, dramatically increased the city's high school graduation rate from 55% to 89%. Name a mayor that could do that. Before entering Congress, she served as president and CEO of the Seattle Metro Chamber of Commerce, advocating for job creation and economic opportunity. Serving in the 119th Congress, Congresswoman Strickland is a key member of the House Armed Services Committee and the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, where she plays a vital role in shaping national security and infrastructure policy. She serves as the secretary of the Congressional Black Caucus, an executive board member of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, and co-chair of multiple bipartisan caucuses focused on economic innovation, HBCU development, global investment, and middle-class job creation. Like I said at the beginning, a champion for working families, education, and economic opportunity, Congresswoman Strickland continues to fight for policies that uplift not only communities across Washington state, but communities like mine and communities across this nation. Now, for the event, what we'll be doing for questions, Madam Congresswoman, is we'll be switching between Akita and I based off the caucus questions and your identity, and then we'll pass it off to Jonica to ask more specific questions relating to legislative policy and Washington state politics. So once again, I'll pass it off to my good friend Akita to kick us off.
Okay, that was a fire introduction.
It really was. Thank you.
You did good with that. Okay, so let me start us off.
Okay.
All right. So how do you see NHPI focused organizing change and stay the same over the next couple of years?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you all for taking the time to be on this call with me as young people who are busy doing a lot yourselves. You don't have to be here. So I'm just appreciative, number one, that you're interested in politics and the political process. And as we have our discussion tonight, I really want to encourage you to find ways to stay involved. And there are many ways you can do that. But as I think about celebrating Black History Month, I think about my heritage as being Black and Korean. As I think about, the question that you asked me about involvement and how we stay engaged, I always tell people that if you look at the United States of America, the people who are in elected office should be a reflection of this entire country. And for a long time, that was not true. But you're seeing more people step up, decide to run for office, and get elected. And, there was a time when if you were not white and you were elected to office, it was because the district you represented was a majority minority district, meaning that the people of color outnumbered the folks who were white. But as time has gone on, you see people of all backgrounds being elected from places that are very diverse. So, my district is about 70% white, but we still have, people there who believe in our abilities. They are judging us based on how good we are at what we do and our ability to connect with folks. So I think that's exciting. So I think about the AAPI community moving forward, there are a couple of things I like to point out. When you think about elections that are really, really close, it is the AAPI community that is often the difference between winning and losing. And I'll use Georgia as an example. Senator Raphael Warnock won a statewide election in Georgia, which was considered a red state for a long time, but is now purple. And it was because there was a lot of intentional outreach to the Asian American community. And that was really the difference between winning and losing. I believe that's true. If you think about the fact that Asian Americans represent the fastest growing demographic in the country and the fastest growing group of voters. So what I say to Democrats is ignore that community at your peril, because if you do not reach out to folks, if you don't talk to them, if you don't understand that people of Asian descent represent 40 languages, a lot of different countries, and we're not a monolith, then you have an opportunity to do something that's really going to be the difference between winning and losing. So I think there are many issues that we as Democrats face, but we have to be very strategic and very intentional in knowing how we reach out to people and never assume that because a community is a community of color, that they're always going to automatically vote for Democrats. You have to fight for every single vote.
Absolutely. It's definitely been a bit of a struggle trying to figure out how to reach out to each and every community. Each one has so many different needs. Specifically in Georgia, the Vietnamese exit poll versus like the Indian American exit poll was so different in terms of like what issues they cared about, who they actually decided to vote for locally and nationally. So it's definitely not a monolith, and we cannot continue to treat it that way, especially going into the 2026 midterms.
And I tell folks the 2026 midterms, the first primary election in 2026 is 13 months away. So we talk about 2026 like it's in the future. It's around the corner. And, I think about, how do we find themes that appeal to all people across the board? And I think there are a couple things we can agree on. I don't care what your background is or what your country of origin is or how many generations your family has been in this country. Everyone wants to live in safe communities. Everyone wants a shot at having economic security, access to a good job, or the ability to start a business, all those things. And so as Democrats, I think we have to be very intentional about the big things that bring people together, as opposed to feeling like we have to appeal to every little single detail of this giant tent that we have. So that's one approach I would take.
Absolutely. I'd love to pass it on to Jordan to ask the next question.
Okay.
Actually, Madam Congresswoman, my question is close to Ankita's question. So, as the Secretary of the Congressional Black Caucus, how is the Black Caucus working to strengthen its messaging? And what personal recommendations you have? Because in 2024, President Trump, sadly, he made a lot of gain with Black voters. And
Yeah.
as a person of color, I speak to those exact voters, and they say, "Oh, he said this. It makes sense." And a lot of people fail to realize, like, he's great at propaganda. He's great at making a scene. So how is the Congressional Black Caucus working to basically combat that and to help make the members of the Black community realize that he's all talk and no action, really?
Right. And you raise a good point. So if you look at the results of the last election, and correct me if I'm wrong, 92% of Black women who voted chose Harris. I think 87% of Black men chose Harris. So for the most part, the vast majority of African-American voters did choose a Democratic ticket. But here's where we are bleeding votes, is that sometimes, especially those of us who are inside politics like you and me, and we pay close attention to things, we think that everyone pays attention to politics the way we do. And most people are just trying to go to work every day, take care of their family, pay their bills, do what they have to do to raise their family, take care of their elders, whatever it is. And so we have to find ways to connect with people before the election year. And I say this because if you look at how Democrats did who were members of Congress, we outperformed the Biden-Harris ticket. We didn't get the majority back, but we picked up 3 seats. So technically speaking, we didn't lose any seats. We picked up seats. And the reason that members of Congress did better than the top of the ticket is because we are constantly campaigning. We run on 2-year cycle. So we are always in community. We are always showing up. The people are always hearing from us. But in a presidential election, we pick a candidate, it's a 4-year cycle, and a lot of the country doesn't know them the way they know members of Congress. And so one thing I've suggested to the Democratic National Committee is that let's make sure that we use members of Congress and that model as surrogates for how we cultivate a positive Democratic brand. I will come back to what I said earlier. We have to talk about the things that people care about. They care about their pocketbooks. They care about being safe. They care about having a fair shot. They care about feeling as though they are included and part of something big. And for all of his insanity, Donald Trump lets everybody into the Republican Party. They got members of the KKK. They have businessmen. They have all kinds of different folks. And even if they may disagree with each other, they don't throw each other under the bus. They don't fight with each other in public. They have one mission, and that's to win. And so when I think about our big tent, it sometimes feels like Democrats spend as much time criticizing each other as we do criticizing Republicans. And if we're going to be serious about winning in 26 or 28, that has got to stop.
Most definitely, Madam Congresswoman. Before I pass it on to Ankita, you made a perfect point. Like, that absolutely made my day, because I feel as though Democrats, we are doing the job, but also at the same time, we're not advertising it. Like, for example, President Trump, I literally hear about this man every day, especially during his first term. But
Right.
during President Biden's presidency, it was like we were more lax. And I feel as though where we went wrong is that we didn't advocate enough. We didn't make sure, okay, President Biden is doing a thing. Everybody was quick to call him Sleepy Joe. He's not doing this stuff. But he was
Right.
the one to get schools back open, COVID shots. And it's like nobody highlights that because they felt as though, okay, it's President Biden. He's like a normal president, so we don't have to cover him as much. And I feel as though that's where we went wrong. And so I just want to make sure I emphasize that point because Congresswoman, you were exactly on point about that. Now I pass it back to Ankita.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely saw that happening. For example, just recently, Senator Ossoff worked to get HBCU funding back.
Yeah.
But I didn't hear anything about that in the news. I only saw that on like, what do the Democrats do today kind of thing. There was a
And I
roundup, and I
heard
was,
it about it because I'm Capitol Hill, so I knew that he did that, but I bet most people in Georgia didn't know that.
no, and that's going to hurt his 2026 run. And that's what scares me a lot about that, because like that's yet another case of,
True.
I guess, the Biden like
Well,
neglect, if that makes sense. Like he did great things, but people just neglect to see what he's actually done.
well, I think
Uh,
there's another thing at play here too that I want to bring up because
mm,
we had the Congressional Black Caucus had our annual retreat, and we, like many groups, we talked about like what happened in 2024 in that election. And I think, we have to understand that the ground has shifted as far as how we reach people. And I think a lot of folks in the Democratic Party still rely on what I call traditional media. I'm going to go on MSNBC. I'm going to go on CNN. I'm going to put something on social media. There is a whole underground of podcasts, influencers, and people who have large captive audiences, and we do not have a presence there. And sometimes we talk about we've got the wrong message, we're saying the wrong thing. It's not even a fight about the right message, it's a fight for attention. And I want you to think about that one more time. It's not even necessarily the message, it's how much time are we getting the attention of people. And look at what Republicans do. They don't care if it's good attention or bad attention, but Trump's name. And when they're ready to roll out what he does, it sticks. And so sometimes we have to understand, not sometimes, we do have to understand, if we're going to win in 26 and 28, we have to win the battle for people's attention, and we cannot rely on traditional media. We have to go to podcasts. We have to go to influencers. We can't be afraid to go on Fox News and to go on Joe Rogan's show. Let's go where the battle is being waged and not be afraid to confront people.
absolutely. That's sort of it doesn't lead into my next question, but it's an
Okay.
adjacent one. It's an adjacent one. What are your current thoughts on the rollback of DEI and the ramifications of that?
So, when I think about the rollbacks of DEI, it should not come as a surprise to those of us who've been paying attention to politics. It is spelled out in Project 2025, and a lot of us have been screaming about this for a year and a half about what Trump intended to do. It is in that 900-page document and even in the summary. And so we were calling out things. And if you look at this whole thing about DEI, what they have managed to do is weaponize that term. So I don't even say DEI anymore. I say diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when someone says to me, I oppose that, I say, well, tell me exactly what part of it you don't like. Do you not like having diverse voices to make decisions? Do you not like having a diverse workforce? Do you not believe that equity is important so that everyone has a shot and a fair shot and that people start in different places? Do you not believe in inclusion? Do you not think that we should include people and bring them into the fold when we're making decisions and hiring and promoting people? And that changes the conversation a bit because DEI has been weaponized. And again, most people outside of our bubble do not even know what DEI is. And if they do, I'm sad to tell you that the majority of people think it is a negative thing. And for some, they view it as these minorities who are not qualified getting these jobs and admissions and opportunities and taking something away from a much more qualified someone else. And so I'm not going to use that term anymore because they weaponize it. I say the words out loud. So what does it mean? If you look at some of the actions that they're taking right now in the federal government, and this is wild, anything, any program, any agency that has engaged in any sort of diversity, equity, inclusion, they're shutting programs down. And one example I will give you is at the United States Military Academy, West Point, right? One of the most prestigious colleges in the country, a military academy. They have shut down the Black Engineers Club, the Korean American Club, the Vietnamese Affinity Group. Every single group related to women or minorities has been shut down. But you know what's still there? The Polish Club, the German Club. And so that's one example of them just coming after any protected class, because that's really what we're talking about with diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are orders right now where they're going to get rid of the Equal Opportunity Office in the federal government. They want to slash that department by 90%. So what I tell folks today, I did a conference call with a group of folks and they said, well, I run a nonprofit organization. We help people, we specialize in serving, underserved communities. What should we do about DEI? And I said, do not be afraid. Just double down on it and keep going. And I say this because if you bow down to the bully early on, you're empowering him. And what bullies hate more than anything else is people who stand up to them and speak out. So I tell people, keep on rolling with your DEI. You probably have seen the list of companies that have kept their DEI, and then there's a list of companies that have gotten rid of it. I can tell you that for a lot of these companies that have gotten rid of it, they're still doing the work. They just call it something else. So DEI, in my opinion, and I think it's factually proven that it's better for business. You make better decisions. You're more successful. Every organization is stronger when they embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not a bad thing, but the MAGA Republicans have taken that term and weaponized it and to make it something that is unfair and something to be afraid of, when in fact, it is there to make things more fair and make it more inclusive.
Absolutely. I don't know if you saw in the chat, but we actually have a post on the anhpi.hsda about how West Point got rid of those, and we actually collaborated with the Black Caucus on that. It was definitely a shock to me that they kept like all the European inspired cultures and like the clubs related to those, but then immediately got rid of anything else, which has me think that maybe they're not, that maybe it wasn't so much that they actually cared, that it was all performative.
Yeah, no, and that's and you raise a really good point, because technically speaking, we're not going anywhere. Okay, you can't get rid of us in this country, and you can't say, well, we're gonna use diversity, equity, inclusion as a way to get rid of all these people. That's just not going to happen. But remember, they have a base of voters that they love to feed this red meat to, and it gets them ginned up and it gets them excited. And I even think about the new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who got appointed. This guy is a Fox News host. He served in the military for a while, but he is not as qualified as Lloyd Austin was, right? A 4-star general, a combat veteran, a man who has run large organizations and large groups of people. So I think about the people that Trump is appointing to serve as heads of these agencies. JFK Jr., right? Health and Human Services, no experience in medicine. And I think to myself, those are the real DEI hires, because according to their definition, these are people who are not qualified, just given these jobs because someone wanted to give them to them. So it's kind of interesting to look at who's actually getting these top cabinet positions versus who came before them, who are highly qualified, often people of color.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I understood like affirmative action and DEI until like last year. I was very confused about what that meant for me in my own college decisions. And I feel like with the more discussion that's been had, I've learned a lot more about it. But I also think that a lot of people aren't like willing or don't have the capacity to learn.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, and it's easy to take terms like that and weaponize them easily when people aren't quite sure exactly what it means, right? And I always say in any conversation I have about affirmative action or diversity, equity, and inclusion, at a bare minimum, you have to be qualified to get into that university or to get that job. That is a base assumption, and it's always true.
Of course. Yes. Thank you so much. I'd like to pass it on to Jordan.
Madam Congresswoman, my question is like, once again, you were recently elected the new secretary of the Congressional Black Caucus. Can you share with us some of the political strategy that the caucus is implementing, not only calling out President Trump, but also combating against President Trump for his reckless policies? For his reckless and damaging policies that have harmed the Black community so far.
Yeah, so you all understand how this works, but I always think it's important to explain everything. So right now in Washington, D.C., the Republicans have the majority. They have the majority in the House, they have the majority in the Senate, and they have the majority in the White House. So what that means technically is that Democrats can bring forth any bill we want, but because we don't have the majority, it is not going to pass. And in order for a bill to become a law, you have to pass it in the House, then the Senate has to pass it, and then the president goes to sign it. But just because we are not in power does not mean that there are things we cannot do. And I say the most important thing that we can do as members of the Congressional Black Caucus and as members of the House is to inform our communities and let them know how these policies affect people. You know, they are firing people left and right arbitrarily with no rhyme or reason. And one example I will give you is this, you know, they're firing people who work for the Veterans Administration. The Veterans Administration provides services, healthcare, counseling, all kinds of services to people who used to be in the military and are not. There are veterans who work for the VA. And by doing that, well, first of all, by firing people, people now can't pay their rent, they can't pay their bills, they don't have a job anymore, and then they're taking services away from people. So it's always important for me whenever a decision is made that hurts people to explain exactly how that harm happens. Yesterday, we took a very important vote and every single Democrat voted no. We stayed together as a caucus, and it was about Medicaid and slashing it. Medicaid serves women having babies, children, it provides health care, it provides food stamps, it does so much for people who are in need. And Medicaid is not a program just for people living in poverty. This affects middle-class families. If you have a grandparent in a nursing home, Medicaid reimburses that nursing home. So we're talking about the health and safety of a lot of people across the board. And that is a way, again, to explain how this happens. So communicating to our communities is one way the Congressional Black Caucus is working very hard so that people know how these cuts affect them. The other thing we're doing too, though, is, you know, we're making our voices heard, right? You see us all over television, you see us writing op-eds, you see us on social media, you see us doing podcasts and really getting the word out to people about what is happening. And then also too, I would say, you know, being very strategic and intentional. And instead of putting all the responsibility on us, the Democrats who are in the minority, we are telling people, talk to the Republicans. They can stop this. By being silent, Republicans are basically saying, I'm okay with what Trump is doing. And all these policies that I just described, Veterans Affairs, Medicaid, healthcare, food stamps, senior care, that affects Republicans too. But by being silent, they're not taking responsibility. So when people come to my office and say, what are you doing? I say, I'm doing a lot. But here's what you can do as well. Call those offices, send them emails, go to their town hall meetings, show up and ask them, why are they not opposing this? Because they have the power to stop this.
Most definitely, Madam Congresswoman. And then my last question before I pass it on to Jonica.
Mhm.
As I want to make this like more personal. Sometimes as a Black American, I sometimes question myself, like, why do I keep on fighting for the ideals of a better country when sometimes this country doesn't like me? So my question to you is, what's your personal message to a Black American like me to keep the faith and to also realize that it's better days ahead, that basically people that came before me, people like you and so many others have gone through way worse to
Yep.
basically help me get to where I am today.
So what I say is this, I mean, I'll talk about this in the context of why should I vote? It doesn't matter. It's not going to make a difference. Every single vote counts. 80 million people didn't vote in 2024. 80 million people didn't vote. So if the people who probably could have been our voters bothered to show up, Donald Trump wouldn't be in the White House right now. We'd have the majority in the House. So when I talk about the why, you already raised it, right? By not voting, by not showing up, by not pressing ahead, you are disrespecting the ancestors who came before us. 400 years, right? We came here enslaved. People fought for basic rights. My father fought in 2 wars in a segregated army. And when he got back stateside to the United States, he didn't have basic civil rights. But everything changes for the better every decade. And this is part of MAGA's agenda, is to roll back rights. When people say, oh, make America great again, like it was in the good old days, it was not good for us. And so I think about the need to press ahead, to keep pressing ahead, and to always press ahead. Each subsequent generation should have an opportunity to make more progress in the direction that we want to go. And what you see happening with this administration is an attempt to take back a lot of the rights that we have fought for: voting rights, civil rights, human rights, all these things that we have fought for. So why do you keep participating? Why do we keep showing up and voting and making the right choice when other people around us can't seem to get there? That's the frustrating part, right? I've had conversations with my friends. It's like, I'm part of the 92% and we're tired. But you know what? We will suit up and we will show up again like we always do. So it's about respecting the ancestors, remembering how far we've come, even though it feels like it's a battle all the time, but we have to keep pressing. That's how we make progress.
Thank you so much for saying that. You most definitely reminded me that America is not perfect, but it's an experiment that we can make perfect. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Now I'll pass it on to Jonica.
Thanks, Ankita and Jordan. Thanks for organizing this event. And thanks for all of the amazing work that you both do in your caucuses. And thank you, Congresswoman Strickland, for being here. Really appreciate you taking the time. I wanted to talk about kind of just some strategies that we as a party can use to embolden people. And it's a really hard time to feel hopeful. And sometimes right now, feeling hopeful can feel like being ignorant because what do we have to be hopeful for? But I want to talk about some strategies we can have in this like resistance 2.0 era. So a lot of the fight to stop the unlawful actions of the Trump administration is being waged in the courts right now.
Yep.
But what leverage do Democrats have in Congress to influence legislation, and how are they planning to use that to put guardrails around Donald Trump's agenda?
Yeah. So what I often say to people is when you're at war with someone, you don't give the enemy your game plan. With that said, however, there are things that we can do in the courts. And just so you know, typically when we end up in front of a judge, we prevail. So courts take a long time, no doubt. But even the birthright citizenship thing, right? We've had 2 judges rule in our favor. So the courts are our friend because the Trump administration is clearly breaking the law and what they're doing is unconstitutional. The margin of the majority in the House is a handful of votes. It's 3 votes. It's very, very narrow. So what it means is that if they have any drama within their own caucus, and they do all the time, and someone decides they're not going to vote the right way, then they're going to have to get votes from Democrats. And we are not a cheap date. So if they decide to come talk to us and say, can we have your votes? Well, there will be things that we expect to get in return. And I'm not going to reveal or tell you what I think the plans are, but we have leverage because their majority is so narrow. But when people often say to me, what is your antidote to Project 2025? It's Project 2026. Taking the House back, getting Hakeem Jeffries that gavel, and making sure that the House Democrats are the firewall against all this insanity that Trump is doing. The other thing we can do as well, again, is just let people know exactly what's happening. When I go out into the community and I say, well, Donald Trump is overstepping his power and he's not respecting the checks and balances, to a lot of people, they have no idea what I'm talking about. Not because they're dumb, not because they didn't get a civics lesson, but people don't pay attention that way. But when I say Donald Trump promised to lower prices for you, to lower the cost of groceries, to make housing more affordable, to put more money in your pocketbook, and he has not done that because all he's doing is tearing down government and firing people, that's a different mindset. And so I think sometimes, we just have to talk in plain language. The most important thing we can do, and I will say this ad nauseum, we have to inform people outside of the political bubble exactly what this Trump administration means to their daily lives, how they are there to hurt people and their lives are not going to get better. And then from a guardrail standpoint, we use the courts, we use the leverage we have with the very narrow House majority, but we make sure that we also come and bring smoke to the Republicans in the Senate and the House. Because again, if we don't hold them accountable the way people want Democrats to be held accountable, then we let them off the hook. We give them a free pass. We let them get away with it, and we cannot let them get away with it.
And on that note of reaching out to voters, obviously in the 2024 elections, we didn't reach the groups we needed to. And now going forward, for those of us who are on the ground organizing in our communities, how can we approach these next 4 years, striking a balance between informing folks of the harmful policies of the Trump administration while preventing the cycle of hopelessness that often precludes action-oriented organizing?
Yeah, I mean, some people think that people have to feel the pain of not voting. Like this is, I mean, I'm not saying this applies to me, but I've heard some people in the universe say, you know what? People need to feel the pain of what it means when you don't show up to vote. This is what you get. On the other hand, we don't want to harm people. And so when I want to ask you a question though, when you said we didn't reach the voters we needed to reach, tell me more.
I think that, in my personal opinion, we relied, a lot of the Biden playbook was talking about Trump is a threat to democracy and
Right.
he's going to be a dictator on day one. And that resonated for people like me and that are highly politically
Yep.
engaged. But for people who are working two jobs and can barely make ends meet, that was not a message that resonated. And we started to see the playbook shift when Harris took over, but
Yep.
we didn't have enough time to reach all those groups who had kind of just, stopped paying attention and saw everything as like just the establishment not working for them. So I think Democrats, it feels like we learned the hard way that democracy message, as true and as serious as it was not resonant. But like, how do we break the stranglehold that MAGA seems to have over the internet and over media and just like the attention that they have commanded?
Yeah, I mean, I think two things. As I mentioned earlier, we go to their field and we're not afraid to show up. So go to Fox News and have a fight with the host. Go to some of these podcasts that are run by right-wing men and show up and say, I want to be on your show and let's talk about some truth. And you can't be afraid to get bruised a little bit and to have an argument. I think that's important. I would say the other thing too, though, is that, to your point about democracy is at stake, we're going to have someone who is going to be a dictator. Yeah, but my eggs are expensive and I can't afford to put gas in my car to get to work every day, right? Not solving that problem. I mean, it's directly affected, but we're not speaking in language that means something to people. But I want to bring something up that I think is really important too. One of the things that we as Democrats, I have a question for you. Are you guys going to post this online?
We usually post all of these interviews and guest speaker events on our HSDA YouTube. And then I think as a caucus, me specifically, I plan to take all of the recordings that I've had from different
Okay.
speakers and compile them into like social media and stuff.
Okay, no, and the reason I'm asking this question is that there are things I would say to you all as Democrats in a private room that I'm not going to
Okay,
put there for the world to see. So that's why
I
I'm
understand.
asking. Before I go into this question, I need to know which answer I need to give you.
You can give both, and I'll be sure not to put the one that you want.
No, and the reason I say this is that I don't want to hand Republicans our playbook.
Of course, no,
Again, as
I
I
understand
said,
that
when you
completely.
go to
It's
war, you don't tell the enemy what you plan to do, right? You show up, you
yes.
surprise them, and you overwhelm them. And so that's why I'm saying that. So, one of the things that I think that Democrats don't do well is that we say we're a big tent and we say we're inclusive and we are as judgmental as hell. We make people pass a litmus test and we say, are you pro-choice or are you pro-choice or not? And someone might say, well, I myself would never get an abortion, but I don't want to stop anyone else from doing it. Wrong. We're not going to endorse you. You're a pro-lifer. You're a nut. We have got to stop doing that kind of stupid shit. If we're going to have a big tent, then we have to have a big tent and let people in, even if they're not with us 100%. And I think there are a myriad of topics that come up in our world as Democrats, and we judge people and say, if you're not 100% there, then you're a bigot, or you're a racist, or you don't care about the climate, or you're this, this, and this. The Republicans don't do that. They're like, if you want to be down with our team, we want our team to be big and we want to win elections. So as I think about the conversation around what Democrats need to do better, yeah, we need a message about the economy. Yeah, we need to talk to people in plain language and get outside of our bubbles of party politics and insider and all these things that we know are important. We have to stop looking down on people because they didn't go to college. We have to stop looking down on people because they go to church and they're proud to be American. We have to stop judging people because maybe they're not where we are when it comes to trans rights. They're figuring it out. They want to learn information. We have to stop judging people if they say, I'm scared that DEI is going to take my job away. We have to let people be who they are and meet them where they are, But as long as they care about democracy and good jobs and unions and want to do what they can to make this country better, and they want to be Democrats, we got to let them in. And so I would say, just philosophically, as Democrats, we have got to stop judging people and stop making them pass litmus tests. That is the most ridiculous thing we do. And I think that it makes people feel like, well, I don't belong there because they're going to talk trash about me and say I'm stupid and ignorant and a bigot, when politically and policy-wise, we actually match 80%. I will take 80% any day over 0.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. I think that's such an interesting dichotomy between Democrats, is our policies are so popular, but just doesn't seem to be breaking
But
through.
we make people as a party feel like they have to adhere to this standard. And if they don't, we look down on them, we talk trash about them, and we call them ignorant.
Yeah,
Can
definitely.
I add on to emphasize, like Congresswoman Strickland, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I really felt uncomfortable throughout the campaign when they kept referring to Trump as a felon, even though he is one. That kind of struck me.
What, hon? What'd you say? As a what?
They kept referring to President Trump like as a felon, even though he is one. I'm about to get to the point.
Okay.
It kind
Oh, I
of
know where you're going.
turned black men away, and not to
Yep.
be rude, as a black man, I
Right.
already kind of have that stigma that people view me as a criminal, even
Yep.
though I never committed a crime before.
Yep.
And so I felt as though that's kind of why we kind of lost a little bit. Don't get
Yep.
me wrong, like you said, the black community did a vast majority, but as the black community, we have to stay united. We got to be together, because those numbers that we lost, it showed with black men, 78%. We usually do much better. And if people kind of go through like 2016, 2020, the numbers were dropping. And the part that I hate about that, I feel as though as a party, it's like as long as we win, that's all that matters, rather than actually analyzing our win, seeing what we did wrong during that win, and capitalizing on what we need to do better. And so I wanted to just emphasize on that point, because I feel as though black men, we don't get me wrong, like we don't need to give attention to like specific demographics 100% of the time, but we need to give enough attention to it to make sure we secure that vote. And I feel as though we really fumbled the ball with black men. We really did, because when we kept referring to Trump as a felon, it went
Yep.
wrong.
No, you are completely right. And what you're saying is, of course, all black men are not felons, but that turned people off, just using that word, and how people, again, looking down on people, judging them, saying you're not good enough. And if you look at the demographics, I know all of you have because you're brainiacs, but we lost. If we had gotten the minority voters that we should have gotten, that we got in 2020, Kamala Harris would be president today. We lost Asian voters. We lost Latino voters. We lost Black voters. And the Democratic Party has to say, what is it that happened? I can tell you one thing that I know for sure from some exit polling. Latino voters were pissed off about the Democrats' position on border security. They said we were weak on border security. And it doesn't mean that you want to run around deporting a bunch of people and arresting them. But a lot of Latino voters were like, I came here legally. I had to wait 6 years to get citizenship. I work hard every day. Why are folks coming across the border, being put in cities, being shelter? And I had to work to do this. And so, again, as Democrats, we make some really big assumptions that are often wrong about communities of color. With Asian Americans, during the COVID pandemic, there was so much hate being spewed toward AANPJ, to the Asian American community. And their homes were being broken into, their businesses were being vandalized, they were being murdered, pushed. I mean, there was so much hate against Asian Americans. And the Democrats did not take crime and safety seriously. That's why we lost Asian voters. And so there are things that we're not focusing on as Democrats that are basic things that people want in their lives, because we're too busy trying to satisfy every single group in passing litmus tests. So again, we have to be smarter and say to ourselves, we can have a big tent, we can have a big message, but people's basic needs, food, shelter, safety, a decent job, that is always the epicenter of what moves people. And because Donald Trump has been in the media for so long and people think he is a successful businessman, which he is not, by the way, but that's the brand, right? mogul, New Yorker, skyscrapers, Trump this, Trump that. So people said to themselves, well, he's going to be better on the economy. When in fact, Biden and Harris were better on the economy. And every time a Democrat is a president, the economy is stronger. But people weren't feeling that because groceries were expensive, gas was high, and the message that we were putting out there was not matching the reality of everyday people.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good reality check for a lot of us who, you know, we read Politico and The
Oh,
Hill,
I know.
it's easy to get.
All the insider stuff, right? In our
Yeah.
little bubble.
Exactly. Switching gears from messaging to kind of like the substantive issue of governing in this Trump era, kind of like on the state level. When people ask me like reasons I'm hopeful and want to stay engaged in politics, my answer a lot is what's going on at the state and local level because there's so much progress we can still make. So how can Washington State and other states who have progressive leadership continue to be a leader on issues such as climate action, immigrant rights, and women's rights in the midst of threats of backlash from the federal government? And how can states kind of prepare themselves because in the midst of threats from the Trump administration to coerce and punish, take away federal funding from states like Washington?
Well, first of all, the whole idea of federal funding, the power of the purse is in Congress. So all the stuff that Trump is doing, even saying to people, I'm going to give you the opportunity to get a buyout if you retire, and I'm going to pay you 6 months' salary in September. He does not have the authority to do that. And so as far as federal funding goes, what I say to Washington State and all of the states that are fighting back against him, keep on fighting. And here's why. The states, Washington, California, Illinois, all the bigger states, we tend to be what I call the donor states to federal funds. We put in more than we take out. And so, you see what Nick Brown is doing in Washington State. You see what Bob Ferguson is doing in Washington State. You see what they're passing in the state legislature. The state and local government is really the one place where there is legitimate firewall to protect people against what is happening with Trump. Now, we can't stop people from getting fired, but the unions are filing lawsuits. When these lawsuits get in front of judges, the judges are saying, you can't do that. And I want you to think about this too. When they are firing people arbitrarily, and then they find out, oh, wait a minute, did I just fire a bunch of nuclear scientists? Okay, that's not what I meant. So you even see them rolling it back themselves. So I just say, keep fighting, keep confronting, do not be afraid to speak out. Again, don't let the bully silence you. That is the most important thing in this conversation.
Yeah, such an important message right now. And then one last question that's kind of like specific to Washington State is how do you plan to support your veteran and disabled constituency among federal pushback?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talked about the fact that the Veterans Administration was one of the first places where they were just arbitrarily firing people. And so, we were actually reaching out to our Republican colleagues saying, I thought you cared about veterans. So what are you doing about this? And you had some Republicans actually saying, this is really bad public policy. We should not be doing this. As far as fighting for the disabled community, I come back to the votes we took last night about Medicaid. Medicaid provides funding and services for a lot of programs that serve the disabled community. So by staying together and voting no as a block, we still lost that vote, but there's a fight to be had. And what it says is if there's something that we disagree with as Democrats, we will hang together because what they're trying to do is divide us, and we cannot let them divide us, either as a caucus in the U.S. House of Representatives or even as Democrats overall, right? Because they know, sadly, that it doesn't take a lot for Democrats to start fighting with each other. Again, I said this earlier, sometimes it feels like we spend as much time fighting amongst ourselves as we do the adversary across the aisle, and that has got to stop.
Thank you so much. That was the last of my questions, and I'll hand it over to Jordan to wrap it up. But I just want to thank you again so much for being here and for your really inspiring words. Really, what we need right now to keep up the fight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jonico. Actually, if it's fine with the Congresswoman, we do have some audience questions.
I'd love to take.
Yes.
Most
Okay.
definitely.
So
All right. So, first person hand up was Chase. Chase, if you could go ahead.
Who said just aren't cool at times? Who said that?
Actually, I didn't. I wanted to explain that, Congresswoman.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
wanted to get to it. First of all, thank you. You had me get about my bond. I had to put my Harris Wallace hat on. I
That's
wasn't
okay.
going
No
to, but
worries.
I had to for the
No
Congresswoman.
judgment. No judgment.
Of course, but first of all, I want to say thank you for this opportunity. It's always great to interact with, our actual lawmakers and have you guys just talk to us. It feels amazing. Feels like we're heard. But you
Yeah.
just said so many points, and I love this full transparency being on a call with a black woman because you always say it straight.
You
And you
do.
said you said so many things that resonated with me. Just a little background on myself. I got to work with the campaign as a youth engagement fellow in North Carolina. So I
Oh,
got to see all these things and I was able to start High Schoolers for Harris, which was the youth coalition for the Harris campaign. And you said something that really resonated with me. Sometimes we just aren't going places that the average American is.
that's right.
We're just not messaging. I feel like what gets lost is that Donald Trump really isn't a Republican. He's just Donald Trump.
That's right.
And what and what
Yes.
Republicans figured out is we don't gotta like this guy,
Yep.
but he's gonna win, and we can figure it out, and we can figure everything else out once he gets in office. And
Yep.
I feel like as we step back and stop analyzing his interaction with Republicans and how Republicans are winning, but let's analyze what Donald Trump is doing. We notice a lot of things that I feel like the game plan for us isn't like let's be Republicans, and I don't think that, but the Republicans are doing something really smart of just acknowledging that the average American isn't necessarily paying attention to like the nitty gritty of policy like we do. They're not looking at, this is what the plan is going to do for this tax bracket and this is going to have an impact on small businesses. They don't
Yep.
care about that because they can't. Because politics is really it's taxing. And when you live in the society we do, you have to get up every day. You have to work. It's not easy to engage
That's
with
right.
politics like that. And I feel like sometimes we already said it, we're nerds, man. We are nerds. And that's our superpower, but that's not the average American.
Yep.
And I feel like another thing with that, which gets to my question, a lot of our politicians in the Democratic sphere are politicians, and
Yep.
they don't feel like people at times.
Yep.
And what Republicans have figured out is that, hey, we're gonna let Boebert do what Boebert does. We're gonna let Green do what Green does because it
Right.
resonates with people that don't want to see politicians. What
Right.
Trump does right is that he resonates with people who've seen him as a reality star for so long. So it's not like he's coming in to be the president or coming in to, make laws. He's just coming in as Donald Trump. And I feel like how, well, I feel like Democrats need to be able to stop like pushing ourselves in these rules where we have to act this way or we have to go about this way because when we actually act as people, when Newsom does the podcast and goes on to Fox News and debates with DeSantis, when Maxwell Frost is able to go out in his community and just play with the local bands, those certain things where average Americans are just able to see our people in power just the same as us, just citizens. It really resonates. It resonates with young people. I was able to do a video with Governor Newsom during the campaign season. He got 24,000 views and it's still counting. We just sat and we just like kind of just interacted with each other and it went, viral. So as somebody who's in Congress, how do you think Democrats can go about just getting the political bureaucratic chains off of our Congress members and telling them just to how to interact with everyday voters? How can we make content? How can we go in the community and just create connections with voters and then take that medicine approach? Once we are in there, then we can start sprinkling the policy because the majority of Americans agree with the stuff we're saying. We're just
Yes.
coming at them with it and they don't ever get to build connections with us. So how do you think the Democrats, that was loaded. I'm sorry. That was a
Oh, no,
lot.
no, no. That was no. But here's what you're saying is that what people want is someone who's authentic and real.
Yes, ma'am.
And think about the presidential campaign season. Oh, look at me wearing my hoodie. I'm going to go have a beer at a bar. Here I am drinking a beer.
Yes.
Real person.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
completely staged. But if you're just being your authentic self, whatever that means, and it's okay to look flawed. I think sometimes people are afraid to look flawed when they're in these positions. So, I've been in politics since I was mayor, and I get the most positive feedback from people in my community when I'm over at my mom's house, working in the yard, looking a mess with a messy ponytail, no makeup, raggedy sweats, in there sweating and huffing and puffing. I have more people stop by and talk to me then than I do sometimes when I'm out, when I'm completely dressed and polished. So they just want to see people who are authentic and regular folks just like them. I think sometimes people forget we're just regular folks like you are. The people don't get to see that often because we're always on the campaign trail. We're being handled. We do photo shoots, all those different things. I'd say another thing too, though, is that I still come back to this, right? People look for authenticity. This is why Donald Trump is appealing. Oh, he's an asshole. He's crazy. He's mean and racist. But you know
Love
what?
it though.
Him, because he's fighting the establishment. And so, he's been able to carve out a brand and identity that people like. I was on MSNBC a couple of weeks ago, and at the very end of the segment, I just blurted out, Donald Trump and Elon Musk don't give a shit about the American people. And my team put that on social, and the number of views that it got. And people were hating on me too. But that's the other thing too. You can't be afraid of getting negative comments in the thread when people talk about you and you do something. Because again, this is just as much a battle for attention as it is for the right message. And I think we sometimes forget that. Get people's attention and then make them think, wow, I associate this person with the Democratic Party. And I think that's part of the challenge. Like, again, when we run for Congress, the brand I'm running in is not Marilyn Strickland Democrat. It's Marilyn Strickland. That's the brand. And when someone runs for president, they're running as the Democrat. And I think sometimes we forget that you have to cultivate that over a long period of time. It doesn't just happen, for 24 months in a 4-year cycle. The 2028 election starts now, and we have to think about who our candidate's going to be, cultivate that brand, and make sure that people understand that everything that we say and do as Democrats, from city council to state legislature to governor's offices to Congress members and senators, all that has an impact on the brand. But right now, we're losing the attention war and we're losing the authenticity feeling.
So can I real quick, Jordan? Can I ask a real quick follow up? I know we have to get to more, but just more, a little more specific because we
Yeah.
Be
talked about,
quick, Chase.
yeah, I know, Jordan. How are Democrats specifically right now kind of planning to like loosen up and kind of get better with connecting with people for 2026? Is there any strategy around, kind of shifting up the way that we've already done it to be more authentic? And that's it.
I
Thank you.
don't think, yeah, I don't think you can say to someone, you need to be more authentic. I think you either have that vibe or you don't, right? Some people are comfortable with it, some people aren't. And so I just think we have to tell people, you know what, let's meet people where they are instead of, again, judging them, telling them that you have to be this, and this to be part of our club, as opposed to saying, this is who I am. Everyone's welcome. You want to come join us. I think it's a difference in attitude. But as I mentioned earlier too, the traditional MSNBC, CNN, Politico, blah, 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 those are all great, but we have to show up in places where people don't expect to see us. And that is looking with influencers, hanging out on podcasts, not being afraid to go again in places where they are not friendly to Democrats, but being willing to tussle with them. I just think we have to be more smart about where we're showing up and not just go where we know we're already there with the choir.
Yeah, absolutely. Jordan did have to head out for a quick second. So I'd just like to say that thank you so much for all the time that you gave us today. I'd like to let Anya Ujval, my policy director, ask you a quick question. And then if you're open to it, possibly extending it out for a little bit to let everyone else who's raised their hands answer a question as well.
No,
Have
I'm
any
happy
questions?
to do that. I can do that.
Okay, awesome. Anya, take it away.
Hello, Ankita kind of introduced me a little bit, but I'm Anya. I'm the policy director for the ANHPI caucus, also the Hindu caucus, and also the First Generation caucus. They kind of, I don't know how they let me do that, but they got a
We all wear a lot of hats.
yeah. So I'm from Texas and I'm kind of a political minority here. And I know that's like kind of like a lot of people in this call can kind of relate to that. I guess like specifically for someone from a red state or red region, as well as like in general, a lot of people are involved with political organizing and advocacy. So what kind of advice do you have for young activists who want to push meaningful legislation and like generate like change?
So if you want to push meaningful legislation, you have to have control of the legislative process. And I'm glad that you're from Texas because, we look at Texas and Florida, right? And we say, oh, well, those are red states. They're gone. Why bother? Demographically, Texas and Florida should be blue states if you look at who lives there. But we as Democrats are squandering the opportunity because we think that a state like Texas that has a big tech audience, a big international audience because of tech, and a lot of Latinos, well, they must think this, and this about immigration. We got that so wrong. I guarantee you that is part of the reason we lost a lot of Latino votes. And so again, instead of just making assumptions about where people are on those issues, let's ask people what they think about it. and say, okay, that should be the policy that we have. And it's entirely possible. So as far as, what I think you can do in Texas, local government is where it's at. I come from local government and I love being in Congress, but when I was mayor, we just get so much done in local government. And as you all know, there may be a red state like Texas, but you have blue pockets of cities. And that's where you have a chance to actually make a difference. So I would say get involved in local government because that's the big opportunity in places like Texas, Florida, even Georgia. And remember this too. There was a time when Georgia was considered super, super, super deep red. And now Georgia's a purple state. Demographic changes, more Latinos moving there, more Asian Americans moving there. So even the ground has shifted since I lived there a while ago. So again, start in local government. That's where change often stops, right? The national movements to raise the minimum wage and do paid sick leave state by state, that typically starts in the local government.
Yeah, I agree. Grassroots is where it's at. Thank you.
And local government's just fun. It really is.
I'll pass the question to any of the other two people who have questions. I know
I'll
there's
take Tenrup. Yeah, go for it.
Hi, Congresswoman Strickland. It's so cool to get to talk to you and hear what you have to say about the current state of our country right now and the Democratic Party. I'm from Washington, actually. I live in Renton, and I'm the Renton High School Dems chapter leader. So you mentioned earlier how the Republican Party and even just MAGA and the Republican Party, they stick together. They have businessmen and women. They have, people from all across the board, and they never throw each other under the bus. Right. And meanwhile, Democrats a lot of times, sometimes, we criticize each other and criticize each other hard. Yeah. And while I really respect what you have to say, and I can see eye to eye with that as well, in some cases, I feel that our criticizing each other is sort of what makes us different and stand apart and, kind of what builds integrity and honesty within us. So, going with what you said of how, we need to stick together and not throw each other under the bus, which is really true, especially in like this time right now. What do you think we should do to continue to maintain that integrity and honesty with constituents, with other people in the party, while sticking together and not throwing each other under the bus?
Yeah, so let me tell you what I mean by that. There is nothing wrong with us criticizing each other and saying, I don't agree with that. Here's what I'm going to do instead. But what ends up happening sometimes is that it can be one specific issue and one specific issue alone, even though you agree on the other 9. And people will say, well, I'm not going to vote in this election. I'm going to vote for Jill Stein instead. I'm just using some examples. That's not sticking together. It is always healthy to have a thoughtful debate because you do get better policy decisions when you have more input and more points of view. But I also like to remind folks that we can have as many debates as we want internally, and that's not bad for the party. But if we are not in power, nothing we want to happen is going to happen. And let me give you an example. Sometimes people ask me if I will endorse them running for whatever position. And I say, I am always happy to endorse you. But if you do not want to use my name, and if I'm a liability to you winning is the objective first. Get the job first, and then we can implement our agenda. But if I'm a liability in our quest to win, then I'm okay to stand down for a while. And I feel like we're afraid to do that as Democrats, whatever the topic is. So have the debate, come up with a position and policy, but when it's go time, you got to show up and vote, even if you're not getting everything you want. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I completely understand that. And that makes so much sense.
Because what I say is, here's something that I want. And maybe right now the Democrats are saying we can't daylight that, but let's get the job first. And then when we get the job, then we can implement the policy. And so again, I think it's something that's hard for us to sort through because we are a large tent and we want everyone to have a voice and we want to please everyone. But sometimes that ends up hurting us nationally when we have to deal with the demographics nationally of who's going to show up and vote.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Madam Congresswoman, for answering that.
All right. Okay. I think Jakari has our last question. If there's anyone else, please feel free to raise your hand now, but forever hold your peace. Jakari, go for it.
Like this is a wedding.
Hello, Congresswoman. My name is Jakari. I also work with Congresswoman Kelly, and so I just want to say that I really value the work that you guys do. She's an amazing woman. I love being able to ask her questions about what the Democrats are doing. My question for you is, I was on TikTok and I saw a clip of Donna Blitz talking about the Democratic Party and talking about the that's not her name. I forgot her name. I thought it was Donna Blitz.
Is she a member of Congress?
No, she's a former DNC chair. She's the Black
Oh, Donna Brazil.
Donna Brazil. Sorry.
Yes, Donna Brazil. Yep.
But she was on TikTok, and I saw a clip of her talk on TikTok, and people were in the comments saying they still don't get it. And she was talking about like the Democrats when Ronald Reagan ran again for president that second term and how bad that blowout was. And so my question for you is, are the comments on social media and the concerns for some Americans like valid? Does the Democratic Party need a major overhaul, or are there just little pieces of like messaging and things like that need to fix, or does the whole system needs to be recast and remolded for the future?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I will tell you that I'm of two minds, right? Because Donald Trump barely won that election. And you hear the Republicans say it was a mandate, it was a landslide. It was not a landslide. It was one of the lowest margins of victory with the popular vote for a GOP in 30 years. And look at how the House did. You know, we were only shy a couple of victories to have the majority back. So it wasn't a landslide. And so some of us think, well, if we blow everything up, we actually have a good foundation. We just need to make it better and smarter and be more smart about where we are showing up to reach voters. Some people say it needs to just blow all the way up because we lost. And so I'm of the mind of the path of least resistance that's going to give us the most long-term durability, because we can't, as Democrats, think about 26 and 28. We have to think about 26, 28, 30, 32. And I say this because the Republicans have had a long game for 20 years. And to be honest with you, it really started when Barack Obama got elected, because America elected a Black man and some people lost their minds about it, and the Tea Party started. What you see today with MAGA is just the latest incarnation of the Tea Party. So part of me says we were this close. We just need to make some adjustments, talk about some different things, talk about some things differently, get back the minority voters that we lost, and continue to build our base. The other thing too is going to happen over this period of time is that you young voters are going to get older. You're going to graduate from college. You're going to own property. You're going to have different needs at how you view taxes. And so I think we always have to be way ahead and have a 20, 30-year plan as opposed to just this election in front of us. Again, the primary election for the 2026 congressional cycle is 13 months away. And we do not have the luxury of not being unified, understanding what we have to do to win, and investing and showing up. And I will tell you, as you know, as young Democrats, we're going to depend on you to give us advice about where we need to show up. I'm not even going to say what message do we need to have. I'm just going to ask you, where do we need to show up? And when it comes to appealing to young people, you are the best validators for this party. I can show up and that's fine, but you have more influence with your peers than I ever will. So I'm going to ask you all for advice. Where are places we need to show up? Are there podcasts? Are there influencers? Are there underground anything going on where you know Republicans have a presence there, or they don't, and we could actually own that space? So that's my ask of you, is like, help us understand where we need to show up to appeal to young people.
Thank you. I love your answer, and I really do like that you said Democrats need to go on those spaces, especially like podcasts. I know that Vice President Harris, that she did try to get into that space a little bit, but I definitely think that is, as technology and social media continues to evolve, I definitely think podcast will be the new battleground for the future for when it comes to elections.
And you know what? Podcasts are good because when you go on a news show, the producer would tell you, this will be a 5-minute segment. and the host will talk half the time. When you do a podcast, you have a lengthy conversation with someone. You go back and forth. You can actually explain something in depth. And I know we think like, well, God, who's going to pay attention to some politician? But if you're engaging enough, if you're authentic enough, people will pay attention. So anyway, I'm going to ask you all to help us as a party. I'm a member of the DNC. Hakeem Jeffries appointed me to the DNC to represent the House Democrats. So I'm going to ask you all for assistance on where you think we need to show up, because we don't win without your help.
Absolutely.
First off, Madam Congresswoman, Auntie Marilyn, you are such the realest Congresswoman I ever met, the realest elected official I ever met. And when you announced that 2028 run, best believe I'm Team Strickland.
Well, let's
Like,
just focus on 2026. My job is to get
yeah,
my
2026,
Yeah.
most definitely. But Congresswoman Strickland, it has been an honor. I was the honor of my life to have been a moderator for this event. You have said some of the realest things that I have heard from a Democratic official in a while. And so it's been such an honor. And on behalf of the NHPI caucus, yes, I got those letters right, and Washington High School Democrats and the High School Democrats Association and youth overall across this country, we appreciate you. And we also
Right.
want to give a shout out to your campaign staff, Sarah, for helping us plan this event. So thank you all so much. Thank you all for attending. We gotta get in contact with you for a part two, because this conversation was fire. This
Yes.
was woo. I had a conversation like this in a while, but once again, Congresswoman Strickland, it was an honor. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, and let's stay in touch because I need your help.
Absolutely. Sarah, do you have a preferred email for if anyone here would like to contact Strickland's office?
Sure. I'll put it in the chat. Thanks so much, guys.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is my bedtime. I got a long day tomorrow, so it is so nice to see all of you. Thank you so much. And again, please stay in the fight. We need you desperately if we're going to win in 26 and 28.
Thank you, Congresswoman Strickland.
Thank
It was
you.
an honor to have you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Keep fighting for us.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.